Okay, welcome to our Ask the Rebbitzin panel. Those of you who have been following Project Inspired panels know we've done Ask the Rabbi panels, as well as other programming as part of our Mindflex series that airs every week in the evenings at 9 p.m. Today we're here with our Ask the Rebbitzin panel, and we're joined by Rebbitzin Lori Palatnik, who is the founding director of Momentum, formerly the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project. Welcome, Lori, from Yerushalayim.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We're here with Mrs. Ruchi Koval, who's of Cleveland, Ohio, and the JFX, the Jewish Family Experience, out in Cleveland, who's actually currently in Lakewood, New Jersey. You shouldn't think that's such nice greenery out in Cleveland, though. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. Welcome.
It's very green. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Welcome, Ruchi. And we're joined by Shoshana Kay. Shoshana Kay is the regional director of Maor, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Maor, Philadelphia,
yes.
As well as the National Program Director of Mikveh USA. I appreciate you taking the time and everyone's different time zone here to be with us and to continue this wonderful series. Of course, Asking the Rebbitzin is a new level, so here we are. I'm going to ask questions, and I know, and I'm going to say this is, we're airing live here, is that many of the questions we're asking, you Rebbitzins have given entire classes about, and maybe even series of classes. But the purpose of the panel is to be able to touch on these subjects in a way that's meaningful, with full disclosure that not everything is going to be covered in every answer that we're giving. These are all, hot topics and full of a lot of information. So I'm going to ask the question. You'll excuse my rudeness if there's any, if we have to, switch back and forth or cut you short. But we're live on air, so everything that any part of me that's being rude is going to be live on air. Anyway, here we go. We're going to cover numerous questions. A lot of them dealing with women's issues. Some of them dealing with women's roles in Judaism, and as well as contemporary issues that women specifically and families are facing. And we hope to be able to cover that within the two-part session that we're covering today. So I'm going to jump in. I've bunched, I know we've had questions that have come in. I've bunched questions together in categories. And so a lot of them, you can ask me to repeat questions. Feel free to do that as well. But here we go. I have 4 questions that are along the same topic. And I'd like to hear, Lori, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to you first because you've been, sort of the veteran here of all the Rebbitzins out there and a spokesperson for women in Judaism. And so I'm going to go to you first.
Veteran sounds old, Rabbi. But
I know.
Fine.
So I said that to Rabbi Orlovsky, is like veteran baseball player. It's like,
most wise, not veteran, wise.
No, you know what? If there was a Hall of Fame for Rebbitzins, okay, that's fine.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The Cooperstown for Rebbitzins. Okay, doke. Here we go. The first bunch of questions are along the same line here. Looking from the outside in, Orthodox Judaism seems to be a patriarchal religious system that places men in power and puts women in a subservient position. How do you react to this statement or this view that people have about Orthodox Judaism? B of that is, why can't women become rabbis? C of that, why aren't they allowed to study Talmud and have no mitzvah to learn Torah? No commandment to learn Torah. And 4, D of that is, why can't we women be counted in a minyan or say Kaddish after a loved one? So again, it's sort of a category of questions where people are questioning or wondering about women's role, specifically when it comes to these commandments of Torah study, etc., within Judaism. Lori, floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm not going to go through A, B, C, D, but I'm going to address some of them. And I'll start with, from the outside in, it looks patriarchal. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I was raised, I actually didn't grow up observant. I grew up in Toronto, Jewish, but was basically a dreidel, kind of Judaism. And it really, in my early 20s, I started my Jewish journey. And from the outside in, it really did look like a patriarchal, ritualistic system. And I was raised by a very strong feminist. And this was not for me at whatsoever. From the outside in, that's what it looks like. From the inside out, it's a whole different ballgame. So first of all, if you study, because really, you know, we're the Jewish people who we're the people of the book, but very few of us read the book. We all saw the movie, The Ten Commandments. Thank you, Cecil B. DeMille. But the book is always better than the movie. When you read the book, in Tanakh, in the Torah, in the 5 books, in the prophets, in the writings, not only are women in there, women rule. That's my kids used to say, like, boys drool, women rule. And it really is true. It is, if you just look at every hug, look at every holiday, and if you understand it, if you study it, if you celebrate it in a meaningful way, in a knowledgeable way, like we just went through Shavuot, okay? Shavuot is like, so this, you know, if you study it's the giving of the Torah, of God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, to give the Torah to the Jewish people. So first of all, what was going on? The Jewish people were building a golden calf, building an idol, but the women did not participate in the golden calf, which was is considered to be a huge sin. It's like one of the major no-nos of the Jewish people, to the point where we were almost going to be wiped out. The women did not participate. God tells Moses to give the Torah to the women first before the men, right? The women got the Torah first. This is the stuff they never taught you in Hebrew school. When we went, and then you move towards this is, you know, you talk about Pesach and the Passover story. The Jewish people, finally got to the border, and the men were afraid to go in. They sent in spies. They came back. They spoke badly about the land of Israel. The women did not participate in the sin of the spies. Of the original people who came out of Egypt, it was only, except for a couple of exceptions, only the women merited to go in. That the Jewish women have a special love for the land of Israel. And that's why Momentum, the organization I run, really focuses on the women. Because even God understood when he told Moses to give it to the women first. Because if the women are in, okay, then everybody's in, right? If the men are in and the women are in, it's not going anywhere. If the women are in and the men are not in, we're going someplace, okay? So in general. So let me just skip to, you had a couple of issues going on there. What was D, like Rabbi?
D was, why can't we be counted in a minyan, you know, 10 people for...
Oh yeah, so this is good. So this is a good...
or Kaddish for a loved one.
Yeah, so it's connected to the story I just told, because again, when you study and you understand it. So what's the whole idea of minyan? So when the men were afraid to go into the land of Israel, they sent 1 man from every tribe. 12 men went in, came back, 10 out of 12 gave an evil report, which caused the Jewish men to say, we don't want to go in. God says, you don't want to go in? Now you can't go in. Now they changed their mind? No. And now they have to wander for 40 years. Why? So a whole generation of men will die out. So this is the source of minyan. Like, why 10 men? Because of these 10 men. I remember. So what happens is that now, that minyan became a rectification for the sin of the spies. 10 men came back to take the people away from God, Torah, in the land of Israel. And from now on, 10 men have to gather in order to bring people closer to God, Torah, in Israel. So when my daughter, who was sent to a very strong Jewish school, when I said to her, I said to her at one point, I said, you know, there are people today who want to count women as part of a minyan. She goes, how insulting. That wasn't our mistake. That was your mistake. So many things from the outside in look like a put down to women. It's actually completely the opposite. Completely opposite. And I do have to say that women can say Kaddish. They are not obligated to say Kaddish because it is a time-bound mitzvah. But women say, I know many women who say Kaddish, and this is not something that is prohibited.
Excellent. I mean, it's interesting that you're looking at minyan as sort of this rectification, where it's sort of like, it's not necessarily this privilege. It's sort of like you got stuck doing this because you messed up.
It's not that you got stuck doing it. Is that this is a rectification. You're not stuck with it. This is part of you earning your way back to all these things, to God, Torah, and Israel. And this is something that women didn't do. So you see that so many things, it's maddening to me. Can I mention another one? Like wearing a kippah. So you see women putting on a kippah? Like why does a man wear a kippah? It's not from the Torah. It's rabbinic that became law. That why does he wear it? Because he has to remember there's a God above him. Can I tell you a quick story? So years ago, we were living in Toronto, and it was Erev Shabbat. It was Friday afternoon. and there was like a street festival, and so when my kids wanted to go, so I brought my little, it was my two youngest, not my two at the time, a girl and a boy, and we went to the street festival, and there was a woman drawing caricatures, and she said, and my kids were like, can we do this? And it was free. I'm like, great. So my daughter sits down, she's drawing her in a funny way, and she's, you know, what do you like to want to be? Like, I like to read books. Then my son sits down, and my son at the time was like, I don't know, maybe he was 4 years old, and she says, take off your beanie, and my son's like this. Okay, and she says, and I said, no, we're religious Jews, and the boys, and the men, they wear those. Oh, she was very respectful because she wasn't Jewish. And then she's like, I don't understand. Why does she have to wear one? Why doesn't she have to wear one, but he has to wear one? So what am I going to tell her? So I said, I said, it's to remember there's a God above you. I said, a man without this thinks he's God. She goes, oh, I got a guy who should wear one of those.
So, Lori, I want to piggyback on what you're saying, because I think a sort of overarching idea here is that the Torah obligates us to do stuff that we wouldn't do on our own, that are hard for us to do on our own, right? Anything that the Torah says, thou shalt not fill in the blank, right? And sometimes you're like, ew, who would do that? But the only reason the Torah told us, the only reason God had to command us not to do it is because for some human beings, that's their natural inclination. The Torah doesn't have to tell us to do things that we're all going to do anyway, right? So like, I think about Momentum, right? Formerly the Jewish Women's Renaissance Project. And if you think about how many women typically go in a year and how many men typically go in a year, women are just naturally, I think this is true like across faiths, across races, ethnicities, women are naturally moved to get together in social groups and do spiritual things. That's just a fact. You can call it yoga, you can call it a book club, I don't care what you call it. Women do that stuff. Men don't. They parallel play. They go bowling and they go golfing. And do they have kids? I don't know. Are they real? I don't know. Are they Jewish? Maybe, right? So the Torah has to obligate men to do stuff that they wouldn't typically do on their own, you know. And in terms of what Lori mentioned about time-bound mitzvot, you know, for anybody who has read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, about how, you know, women in corporate America need to stand up for their rights and say, no, women are not the same as men. Women need allowances for their womanhood, and they need different kinds of bathrooms, and they need allowances for childcare, and they need allowances for pregnancy and pumping at work and all that kind of thing. Like, the Torah was so ahead of the curve. The Torah said way back, you know what, women, you're exempt from time-bound mitzvot because we want you to allow, if you can and you have the ability and it's your time of your life to do this, we want you to be able to plug into your family without feeling a shred of guilt. That's so progressive when you think about it. And for women who are not in that stage of life or who do not have children, whether not by choice or by choice, that's okay. Go ahead and do those mitzvot. They're not disallowed. They're simply exempt.
Amazing.
Excellent. Can I add something else that the Torah is way ahead of their time? Like if you think about the Ketubah, which is the marriage contract. So what is a Ketubah? Chances are you haven't read your Ketubah lately. And if you do, it's in Aramaic. I don't know how your high school Aramaic is, but it talks about a man's responsibilities and obligations to his wife. And if it doesn't work out, this is what she owes him. Okay. If he doesn't fulfill his obligations, she can divorce him. And I have to tell you, it's a prenup. Okay. Before Jane Fonda married Ted Turner, this is to protect women. Like as Ruchi is saying, the Torah is so ahead of its time in terms of.
It's so funny that they're like framed on the dining room, you know, framed in the dining room. You're like, here's your prenup just in case it doesn't work out, guys.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? I'm coming from a different perspective because you ladies are working with women. So my college students will often say to me, like, that is so misogynistic. That is like so sexist. Why can't I be in a minion? Aren't I a good college student? Right? Don't I look like I'm 18? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Guy Friedman doesn't know what to say with himself. Like, is he supposed to say, yeah, you look like you're 18? Poor man.
I told you, ignore me.
Don't I look like I'm a teenager? Okay. So they'll be like, that is just so, you know, so typical. That's so typical. So I do on our Shabbatons, I give a class like Judaism uncensored or Judaism up close and personal, and we always discuss this idea of minion. It's so interesting that I too, like Lori, grew up in Toronto, and I was so offended by the fact that I was barred from all of these things that men could do. But what we're doing is we're harming ourselves as Jews, because most of us have college education and intellect, but we're coming into Judaism with like a kindergarten level knowledge of what is our Torah, our instruction manual. And the fact of the matter, when you look at minyan, that's exactly what Lori said about the spies. It's a crazy thing because, you know, I'll never forget a few years ago, our students, especially at Temple University, loved, it's very difficult to give anything today that has political analogies. So when I used to speak about this president or that president, it was much easier. So now I'm not even going to go into politics.
I noticed there were no questions about politics on this panel.
No questions about politics. But I would ask the students, tell me something. Let's pretend there was like a school, an elementary school board meeting, and it had 10 parents at this board meeting. And that night, the most important person at the time, so who would you like it to be? You want it to be Oprah, you want it to be Michelle Obama, whoever you desire, who would you be? So the students would come up with very different, interesting answers. So think about whoever that person is that you think, wow, if they came to my school and I could ask them for anything, they would come to this board meeting and they show up and there's only 9 parents. And this person, let's say it's Oprah Winfrey, a mother's evening, and even though she's not a mother, or some significant, let's say it's Lori Palatnik coming to, you know, the shul meeting of 10 women and only 9 women show up and each woman had to be voted in and she was there for a purpose. Could 9 women and Lori pass a new bylaw, regardless of how unbelievable Lori is? Absolutely not, because each person there is there for a specific reason. So often as women, we look at Judaism and say that is so unfair. But really the truth is, if we come to understand it, you know, when you drive, ladies, I don't know if you have it, but near us, you know, when you drive to a drive-up banking and you hit the button, that drive, like the lazy banking of today, you hit a button, it goes up a chute, and there goes your banking. So really, Jewish law tells us that for a man to have the same level of efficacy of a woman's prayer, he has to be in a minyan to create a reparation for what Lori said. But when I'm praying alone at any place in my house or on the street or on the beach, my prayers are like the drive-up banking. I hit a button and go, shh. If a man prays alone, his prayers, sorry, Rabbi Friedman, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your prayers will still get to the same place, but they're going to go, shh, 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 shh. And you know, that's the magnificence about Judaism. The more we learn, the more we come to understand, whoa. Well,
I think
the perception that I had was not correct.
Right. I think that's really the common denominator really in the answers given here is that really if people are looking outside into Judaism as a patriarchal system, delve in a little more, come from the inside out and recognize why it is the way it is, and you'll recognize that really it's not such a patriarchal system inside.
You know, it's bigger than that too, Rabbi, because I think that this is something I call the great synagogue mistake. You know, Lori calls it looking from the outside in. I think a lot of Jews who didn't grow up so connected and involved, Judaism was defined by what happens in the synagogue. In fact, Judaism was often outsourced to the synagogue. The rabbi is the one who knows what to do. I don't know what to do. The rabbi is the one who knows how to read Hebrew. I don't know how to read Hebrew. So if you're going to come into religion and only look at what's happening in the synagogue, you know, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, the men run the show. That's so sexist and misogynist, you know, and as Lori says, it would be understandable for you to view things that way. But Judaism, the synagogue was never meant to be the central locus of your Judaism and your spirituality. The home was. And, you know, I don't want to make the mistake of saying, oh, women are awesome. Let's throw the men under the bus. They're the ones who need this. That's not true either. Judaism says simply that there are male and female energies in this world and that men and women each carry different strengths into this universe and that we need to mutually support one another, you know, in this synergistic approach to achieving spirituality and making a difference in this universe. So I think a big piece of it is looking at Judaism through this myopic view of synagogue. That's never...
So, Rookie, I totally agree with you. Do you know why that the synagogue? I would meet people sometimes, I remember in Toronto meeting people when my kids were young, and they would find out I'm a rabbi's wife, and they immediately start confessing. I don't know if people do that to you guys.
Oh,
but
I always say I have a sign on my forehead that says "Confess to me."
Yeah. So they
tell me all your sins.
They would say I'm such a bad Jew, and I always say confession is
such a bad Jew.
But they start confessing, and they start saying, like, you know, like being very apologetic. Like, I hardly ever go to synagogue and I'm such a bad Jew. And I would say to them, the definition of a good Jew is not somebody who's shul going. So Ruchi, why did it become that the synagogue suddenly became like, if you go to shul, you're a good Jew, okay? Why did the synagogue suddenly become the center of the Jewish community? Why? Because the definition of a good Christian is somebody who's church going. And I explained to them that that's not Judaism. That's not Judaism. Because they would say to me, I hardly ever go to synagogue. I go, I hardly ever go either. They're like, what? I go, yeah. Like I got little kids or this. And I said, thank God I don't have to go.
That confessing is also Christian, that whole confession thing.
So I say
the idea of Judaism being like so hierarchical, like only the rabbi knows what to do. That's not a Jewish idea at all. The Jewish idea, the Torah was given in the desert because it's ownerless. It's everybody's.
So what's the goal? So I say to them, so what is the definition of a good Jew? It's not, you don't have to go to shul to be a good Jew. It's your relationship with Hashem. It's your relationship with God. Do you have a relationship with God? Do you understand what that relationship means? Do you understand your responsibilities in that relationship? And do you understand what your role is to play in this world? That's the goal. So once you've got that down, because if you don't know what your goal is, what your job description is, you can't achieve the job. So now that I know that that is my job, now how do I, as a woman, how do I as a man, how do I as a child, how do I as a professional, how do I fill in the blank, achieve that goal?
Excellent. Okay, I want to move on to the next question, if you don't mind, because I think that some of this is going to be, we'll touch on within other questions as well. I'm going to go to you, Ruchi Koval, for this one, because you did touch on some of this as being a mother, the mother role of in Judaism, etc. The next two questions bunched together are as follows. Feminism started in large part as a reaction against the traditional role of women as mothers and wives. Doesn't this role keep women from self-actualization? And B of that is modern feminism posits that women should be allowed to express their femininity without being told how to act, dress, what positions they can or cannot occupy. Traditional Judaism seems to fly in the face of this philosophy, since it bars women from doing many things that they may choose as an expression of self. Meaning, how do we balance that? Again, you touched on it in terms of women having, not being bound to time-bound mitzvahs, etc., because Judaism and the Torah recognize that women need that role. How do you balance that in light of what you call progressive thinking today?
Okay. So it's interesting that feminism was largely created by Jewish women, right? Think about the book, The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. Honestly, I think the book was a lot more about dissatisfaction than about womanhood. And I think that because, as I mentioned before, not every woman is a mother, not every woman is a wife. And there was no framework for that. It was all very 1950s, and women were feeling very choked by that. And so Jewish women, who by definition are agitators, thinkers, ambitious, world changers, as we should be. Again, that is a spiritual gift gifted to us by God for a purpose. They were looking around and they were saying, what is the meaning of life? Is it really just about starching dresses? And oh my goodness, the answer is no. But because these women were not strongly Jewishly educated, many of them didn't even think to look into Judaism for meaning. And so it was about, honestly, thank God, 7 kids, bless their souls. I love them all. But if my whole life was just about caring for their physical and emotional needs, I would have burned out 1,000 years ago. It's only because I have this spiritual goal in my mind. I am raising human beings who are going to carry my values to the next generation. I'm creating eternity. And honestly, while some women feel super fulfilled by being stay-at-home moms, and I respect that enormously, and as a woman, I have imposter syndrome. So sometimes I look at those moms and I'm like, those are real moms. Okay, another talk for another day. Mm-hmm. But I do have a need to make a difference in a larger, or I wouldn't even say larger, in an alternate arena. And that's why I do what I do. And I need to use a different part of my mind because that's how God made me. And I don't think that makes me, a better mother and a worse mother and all of that, feminism stuff, as you were mentioning. But I can honestly think of no framework that is more self-actualizing for women than the framework of Judaism. The idea that and I'm not saying this to the exclusion of men, The idea that I have a God-given soul, that I was put into this universe to make a difference in this world, that God loves me personally. I have a personal relationship with God that is not connected to a husband, that is not connected to children, that is not connected to my job, that is not connected to my rabbi, just me, woman, daughter of God. I'm like getting emotional because it's so beautiful and it's so special. I ache for more women to know this. That's why I'm involved in Momentum and Lori's amazing project. And the dress, I just want to touch on the dress for a moment. You know, again, Judaism has expectations of men and women. Are they the same expectations? They are not, because we are wired differently. And so when it comes to physicality, to sexuality, to objectifying women, which is such an important buzzword in our culture, important and rightfully so, the Torah teaches us this: men have to be more careful with whom they objectify, meaning men have to be really careful about how and what they look at. And women, and I know this is a very unpopular opinion today, so if you want to edit me out, do so, but women have to be really careful not to objectify themselves. And this is different and it's important. The way the Torah teaches me to dress in a dignified manner, because my soul is the most important part of myself, and because I don't want to misrepresent myself. I want to retain my self-respect no matter where I go. Oh my goodness, what a liberated idea.
I'm going to stop you on that because we are going to touch more on this, in a question going forward, specifically about dress and objective, we'll get to that in a second, but I think the point is extremely well taken in terms of knowing who you are as a Jewish woman and your connection to God as a daughter. Shoshana K., you're dealing with students who might not be maybe as mature as a lot of the women that Lori and Ruchi Koval are in touch with in terms of the trips, etc. How do they view this in terms of, how do you express this to people who ask this on that level?
It's really interesting because I'm actually coming from the corporate world. So when I became more observant, I was looking at things from the lens, because I also thought, that Judaism, the big expression that I had in my head, the buzz phrase was like barefoot and pregnant. That was my perception, that religious women are in the kitchen having lots of babies.
One time my husband came home and I was barefoot and pregnant. I was pregnant and I was.
You know how many times my husband came home and I was barefoot pregnant in the kitchen? I'm like, I am an actual cliche.
Okay. So, that was so interesting. And actually, when I started learning in Thornhill back in the day, 5 years ago when I became religious, just when I was 25. So a couple decades ago, I was amazed to see what a real liberated, empowered woman looked like. And it just so happened that God orchestrated what we call, a divine providence, hashgacha pratis, that each woman that I was introduced to they seemed like the superwoman that we speak about, which today is actually interesting. That I think that's almost dangerous today, but that's a different conversation. But anyhow, what I discuss with my students, a buzzword is equality. Everyone's equal today. And I asked them, tell me about the Torah. Do you think the Torah believes in equality? And they're like, well, yeah, because if you keep telling us about this Torah, that's an instruction manual, and that we can take ownership of it and be empowered by it. Of course, Judaism believes in equality. And I told them, I always say, if anyone tells you Judaism believes in equality, they are lying to you, because we don't want to believe in equality. Equality means I am the same. And my job in this world, whether it's me against a man against a woman against a woman, I cannot live in this world comparing myself to anybody. Compare, despair. If I am going to strive for this sense of equality, especially in the genders, then I am without a doubt minimizing what my own unique potential is. Judaism believes, the Torah teaches us that just like an apple and an orange, they're both fruits, they both have their own significance. If I make an apple orange, a GMO apple orange, I'm not going to get the best quality fruit. My job in this world is to do the best that I can with the gifts that I am given. And if God has created my soul in the form of a female, therefore I have the ability to become the best version of a woman that I can. And it's not relative to a man. it's relative to me. And it's dangerous. Equality is a dangerous thing. Judaism teaches that each of us have the unique ability to actualize our own potential.
And Lori, I just want to go to you on this because equality is a big word out there, and it's a it's a hot topic. Your thoughts on Shoshana K's equality comment with regard to women viewing it that way.
No, my Rebbetzin always says, like, don't settle and be like a man. Like, be a woman. Like, why settle? So it reminds me of, you see, like, even with, forget about men versus women, like men versus men. Somebody comes from the tribe, they're a Cohen. And so there's certain responsibilities they have and certain privileges that they have. They're called to the Torah first. And when you're doing the grace after meals, they lead it and all these things that they get to do. And if you're a Levi and, so there, my husband's a rabbi. So here's a rabbi joke. Rabbi, you're going to love this, okay? It's a rabbi joke. So guy goes. You know me well. I love rabbi jokes. Yeah, I'm sure. So the guy goes to the rabbi. The congregant goes to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, I want you to make me a Cohen. He goes, I can't make you a Cohen. He says, Rabbi, I want to be a Cohen. He says, I can't make you a Cohen. He says, I'm going to give $1 million to add a new wing to the synagogue if you'll make me a Cohen. And he goes, Saul, why do you want to be a Cohen? He goes, because my father was a Cohen, my grandfather was a Cohen, and my great-grandfather was a Cohen. He goes, okay, you're a Cohen. Okay. Yeah. So obviously he was a Cohen all along. So a Cohen's not better than a Levi, and a Levi's not better than a Yisrael. And a woman's not better than a man. A man's not better than a woman. We, as Shoshana was saying, and as Ruchi is saying, we're unique. It's so fantastic. You are you. There is nobody like you. And the Torah is saying that there is an avenue, again, to the goal of being, not just actualizing the best woman and the best man, of achieving the goal of having the ultimate relationship with God and realizing your unique potential of who you are. And I have to tell you, I came from the world of advertising. Shoshana says she came from the corporate world. I worked for Leo Burnett. I was a copywriter. I worked in advertising. So I always said that first of all, I'm still in advertising. I just have a better product. But in advertising, I never saw.
Great line, Lori.
Thank you. So as I told you, I was raised with a very strong feminist mother. And she would have consciousness raising groups. And I knew as a little girl how to say consciousness, okay? And the women would gather once a week. And my mother said when everybody started leaving their husbands, she sort of got out of that because she was not into that women trying to be like men or women hating men. The feminism she gave me was people treating people like people. And as Ruchi was talking about being objectified, because in the world, I never saw the feminism my mother gave me actualized in the world of academia, or actually where there's a tremendous glass ceiling, and in the world of advertising. Oh my gosh, like woman with sexy hair, buy the car, get the woman. Okay, talk about being objectified in that world, and it was a shock to me, shock beyond shock. That when I walked into the traditional Jewish world and I was tiptoeing in, this is where I saw the actualization of that feminism. And the way we dress is part of it. It's like, because I am dressing in a more dignified way, then it helps a man to see me, to not objectify me, and to see me for my mind and my soul, as opposed to the world. A friend of mine told me that she had a friend who was going for a job interview. And the night before this very, very major job interview, she was going through the closet and she was asking, our mutual friend to help her pick out an outfit. And so my friend had become more observant and she pulled out a really sexy, go to the nightclub outfit. She goes, why don't you wear this? She goes, are you crazy? I would never wear that. I want them to respect me for who I am, for my mind. And so the point was taken. The point was taken. So there was a book on a bestseller list years ago. I
just want to stop because there's the next question really segues into this because both you and Ruchi Koval mentioned that men have to be more careful about looking at things, women in terms of how they dress, etc. It's a hot topic, and a lot of people are asking.
Right, Rabbi, I just want to interrupt you. It's not just about how they dress. I said objectifying yourself. You can objectify yourself with a look and a giggle.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I know. I'm segueing.
Oh, and be very immodest.
Got it. I'm exactly. I'm segueing into this next point because many people feel that, oh, so you're telling me how to dress because it's for the men. It's like to prevent men from stumbling, etc. Like that's why I need to dress that way. Like, is that really? Is that true? Is that a misconception? People feel that like you're setting the set of rules for us, not because of us intrinsically, but it's because of how other people will view us. Your thoughts on that, Lori? Even just segueing from your.
I think I'm gonna let Shoshana. Shoshana was wanted to take this.
Go for it.
My cleaning lady is vacuuming. Can you hear the vacuuming?
Oh yeah.
Should we wait, or should I just keep going?
You go. It's just buzzing in the back.
Welcome to our house, everybody. Okay.
Send her to my house next, please.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because if you look at a Torah scroll, how is a Torah scroll dressed? When we're in synagogues, coming back to the synagogue, it's wearing this beautiful velour, like the Torah is clothed in this beautiful silver and velour, and people spend a lot of money to sponsor this. It's a very interesting thing, and if you ever look at a man that has any kind of Torah knowledge, you never see them walking around in like flip-flops and a tank top and shorts. You just don't, right? So what is this idea? From the age of 12, it is incumbent on a Jewish woman to dress a particular way. Is it really for the men that we're doing this? Am I dressing a certain way? If I'm, as a Jewish woman, we have 3 very strong Jewish women here. Every day I get dressed and I think to myself, well, today I need to look attractive, not attracting, God forbid, because of this man. Or today I need to feel like a royal princess so that no man looks at me. That is clearly not the way we are raising our daughters or raising ourselves for that matter. So it's an interesting thing that really the way we dress is because the more spiritually attuned something or someone is, the more we have to protect them and dress them for what they are. Like if there was a magnificent new diamond that was put out at Tiffany's, they wouldn't just put it out on the counter, come all to look at it. They would shine light in a certain way and they'd make sure there's beautiful velour. And then they would every night package it away to make sure it's safe and kept sacred. So too with each and every one of us. Why did I bring in the Torah and men? Because it's an unbelievable thing. We often come and think about it from a second class or a backward positioning that compared to men. Men can do anything and we can't. No. The fact of the matter is that any Jewish woman from the age of 12 is already carrying the same spiritual potential as that of a Torah, as a Torah scholar or a Torah itself. Anything that has spiritual weight to it has to be dressed, has to be packaged in the way that is commiserate with what that spirituality is.
I don't think that that's like just true of women, because again, I don't want it to be like, oh, well, men are not spiritual, they don't have to be as covered. I just think what we don't realize, and it's Allison Josephs from Jew in the City who I think highlighted this expression, something called the skin gap. If you look at how a man or a woman is dressed on a beach, right? A man is wearing these loose trunks, they go down to his knees, and the woman is wearing this super skimpy bikini. You go to a black tie event, right? The men are wearing more clothes than they've ever worn in their lives, and the women are wearing less clothes than they've ever worn in their life. Look at jeans. Look at men's jeans versus women's jeans. Everyone's like, oh, women's clothes never have pockets. Yeah, that's because they're so skin tight that if they had a pocket, you couldn't even get anything in or out of them.
Right.
But it's not even like women and men are starting at the same level. And now you're like, oh my gosh, Judaism makes women dress so much. You know why there's so much less of a difference between Orthodox men and non-Orthodox men? Because men in general are always allowed to wear more clothes. You know what I mean? That's the part that's not
I think that's coming from like a societal perspective. I'm speaking about that we lost Yossi. Yossi's still here?
That's okay. We can go without the rabbi. We don't need him. It's okay.
I'm talking about the fact that I should view it as something that's a gift for me. You mean I'm the same? I hear you. When my daughter is 12 years old, she has the same spiritual potential as that as a Torah scholar, and I just think that's a societal misnomer that women, like you said, are objectified and put in a situation that they feel a need to dress this way, or that their femininity is only expressed if I'm the less clothes that I have.
And take one look at Instagram.
Want to see you from the inside. I want to see what you really are. I want your essence to shine outward, rather than
take a look at
you and see it from the outward inward.
I mean, what's going on Instagram and Snapchat with teens and even preteens, the pictures that they feel they have to post about themselves, the pictures that they're sending 6th grade girls to 6th grade boys, they feel that they have to do this to prove something. It's so sad, you know, and like, I mean, thank God, I'm so grateful, and I don't take any of this for granted, but my 17-year-old daughter, okay, who will not be seen in front of guys in a bathing suit, she only swims with other girls. She was buying a new bathing suit this season, and she sent me a link on Amazon, because that's how we talk these days. She sent me a link on Amazon. She's like, Mom, is this bathing suit too sexy? You know? What did she mean, too sexy? Too sexy for other girls? She's not taking any pictures of herself in it. She's not showing herself to men. For herself. She felt a sense of dignity. Yes, she's wearing a bathing suit because she's going swimming. And yes, certain body parts are showing that don't usually show. But even within that, you know, it's like it's kind of like what you're saying, Shoshana, that it's like there's a certain sense of dignity. I am a dignified human being. You know, you can wear a bathing suit and you can wear a bathing suit. You can wear a tank top and you can wear a tank top. You can wear shorts and you can wear shorts.
To you and to your daughter, obviously, that she recognizes her regality. She recognizes what she is. I mean, I don't know about you ladies, but I grew up with such insecurity, especially being a chubby kid. Hello, my whole life. Forget it. It was like a social nightmare, okay? That's a crazy thing. It happens to be that my girls have all different shapes and sizes, but I don't want my girls being raised based on what they look like physically. They're magnificent. Each and every one of us are so magnificent. And society told me as a young child that, like, you're less than because of your physicality. No ways. Each of us have so much to our essence, and that's what we learn from the magnificent Torah, that once we take, its essence is in the Torah itself, not in the externalities. And I just think it's so important. I want my college students to be able to create a reparation for themselves, to see, girls, you're so magnificent. It's not.
That's it. I think girls are afraid to set personal boundaries because it's so countercultural, and it takes so much guts and courage to say, I don't have to be that girl. I don't have to show my body that way. It takes so much courage. But you know, just coming from the other side of things, because I was raised observant and I was raised this way, and I went to, you know, an Orthodox Jewish day school. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I was 16 and 17 years old, I didn't always love the fact that I wore skirts, and I was like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be fun to wear leggings, and wouldn't it be fun to wear a tank top? I craved that, right? That was me on the outside looking in. That looks like fun. That looks liberated. That looks free, you know? So I'm not going to pretend that, like, oh, I'm always in love with dressing modestly. I'm not, okay? And when I lead trips in July in Israel on Momentum, I am hot. Not that kind of hot. The like 100 degrees kind of hot, okay? And you know what? As I become, you know, as I continue to grow and mature and become like the greater human being, the more wisdom I see. So it's not that it's always convenient. It's not that it's always fun, because Judaism is a religion of self-discipline and transformation. And nothing that requires discipline and transformation is going to always be easy or fun or convenient. But that's how you become something amazing that you didn't used to be. That's how self-actualization happens.
Can I throw something else? Just a bonus.
Go ahead. I want to get to one more question.
Yeah, I think that Ruchi and Shoshana, like they spoke about the essence of it very beautifully. But just a bonus to this, now that I'm not so young anymore, and I'm not an aerobics instructor anymore, and I've had 5 children, I like it. And I see amongst the thousands of married women who struggle sometimes in their marriages and who are trying to keep their marriages strong, I like it that my husband does, like, runs in circles where he doesn't see women, like you're saying, on the beach in bikinis, okay? And he doesn't see women who look in a way that maybe we don't look that way anymore, because you create this sacred space within yourself and within the most primary relationship that you have, and you protect that space.
Well, I just have to say something. When I'm on an Israel trip, not Momentum, maybe one day, but or Israel trips with my college students, and we go through like the very religious neighborhoods, and the girls will come back and be like, that is so disgusting. That man wouldn't even look at me. He turned away when he saw me. And I'm like, disgusting, girlfriend, are you serious? He understands what your own spiritual, sensual, sexual potential is. He's not looking at you, not because there's something wrong with you. He's not looking at you because he's protecting his own ability to see his wife in a certain way. And he's not looking at you because of the fact that he understands the power that you have. That's the Jewish woman. It's not coming from a negative place. And I think the most important thing as Jewish women is when we don't grow up with it, we almost have a negativity towards it. We see it from a lens, a very small lens.
I just want to comment, I don't have that many comments, but just to that point is that same man that you're describing, if his daughter would bring this girl home as a friend for Shabbat in their house, would be the most warm,
nicest.
Share his home and his life, right? Because
Rabbi, I don't want to whitewash this, okay?
I agree. I'm going to push back here. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm pushing back. I don't want to whitewash this because there are men who I know, very religious men, that when I'm talking to them and I'm dressed modestly, okay, I think I'm modest in my demeanor, are looking.
You're very modest, Lori. You've got a 10.
I'm like, hello, like you look at me like this. That's not comfortable to me.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying many times, and I've had this because there are many people who, people come to my house and say, "Oh, we ate last night by so and so's house," and I'm saying to myself, really, that person walks down the street, literally their glasses off and their face covered. How was it? And they'll describe the most amazing experience.
I agree. That can happen. But I just want to say something.
Go, Ro.
Judaism believes that every good value and every good character trait can get radicalized, and modesty can get radicalized. And I think it's very important to call that out. We don't believe in covering our faces unless you're wearing a mask for Corona, in which case cover your face. We don't believe in, we believe that everybody should be friendly and you should greet each other. You walk down the streets of Jerusalem and you say Shabbat Shalom to a man and he ignores you. Sorry, I'm going to call that what it is. Rude. Okay.
That's rude.
And no, but even the not looking, there's a 14-year-old boy who's not looking at a Momentum woman walking down the street. I'm not talking about if she's dressed modestly or not. I'm sorry. He's not seeing, the potential in her. Whatever, this particular example aside, I just want to say that every good thing can get radicalized and modesty can be used to silence women, and it should not happen. That is not a Jewish value.
There's no question. I just want I'm pointing out the flip side is that it also has to be respected, like Shoshana K mentioned, that the fact that people do not want to have to see everything that there is to see in the street.
I agree, and part of that is cultural. You have an American young woman, particularly from a college campus, who's literally coming from the hookup culture, and she's walking through Mea Shearim, and you know what I mean? It's so beyond foreign. So some of that is cultural. I grew up, like I said, Orthodox my whole entire life. I never saw a man not look at a woman until I got to Israel, okay? So part of that is Torah and Judaism, part of that is cultural, and part of that is radical.
And you'll also find...
We have to be able to take each child... We teach that each child has to be educated according to right. I know in my house myself, I have a 16-year-old son right now. I have a 13-year-old son. Each one is so different. I know my 16-year-old is going through a very major, spiritual growth stage in his life, spurt. And depending on who's in our house, he is the friendliest, cutest, nicest boy, but he is working very much on protecting what goes into it, what he sees. Now, he would always be so respectful. My other child, who's completely opposite to him, would be hanging out next to the girl, and that's okay as well. For each child, and I will support my oldest son and if any of our students ask, I noticed Nassan's not really looking at me, I would be honest and say, you know what? Right now he's really working on his own spiritual, but they will tell you, they'll be he's the cutest thing. He's so polite. When he's having a conversation, but he's trying in his own.
I think that Ruchi was just pointing at balance and not being radicalized.
Yeah, totally. That's really
important. So I think it's important to say, as Lori said about not whitewashing, I am often put in a position where I'm asked to defend Jewish values, and that's fine. That's cool. That's what I do professionally. But I will not defend the indefensible. There are Orthodox people who do wrong things.
100%. And Neely always says, Neely Cousins always would say, Momentum, major You're in
Yeah, yeah.
So
If you want to know
that was like a big famous phrase. Do not judge Judaism by the Jews.
Okay, wait.
That was
Sorry.
from Noah.
I'm going to push back on that.
No, second. I just want to say because there's more.
Getting off topic.
There's other opportunity to come to this and to this point. But for this segment, there's one more question.
Are you having fun moderating these women?
Totally. It's like. By the way, I have 6 daughters. So.
Any son?
Yeah, one. The prince himself. A of this is I have heard that women are actually exalted in Judaism, thought to be closer to God and put on a pedestal by their husbands and children. Is this true, and why isn't this idea more widespread? I think we've covered that, but B of that is it is said that women are more spiritual than men, and women are seeking spirituality in society at large more than men. How can women access this within Judaism? And you as a panelist, as a panel, are there mitzvot you would specifically suggest to a woman who wants to become more spiritual to connect with in their lives?
So I think it's a very good point. I do want to say, and this connects to things we said earlier, that you see that the desire for a woman to be counted in a minyan, I believe it is not a feminist, it's not a like, I want to be like a man desire. For a woman who wants to fill in the blank, okay? She wants spirituality. Yeah. She has a desire and a craving in her soul to be close to God, because that's who we are. That was placed within us. I grew up in Jewish in Toronto, and prayer was twice a year, unless there was a bar mitzvah. It was Simon Says. That means that your goal is not to be sitting when they're standing and not to be standing when they're sitting. The rabbi talked about bonds. The rabbi talked about Israel. The rabbi talked about politics. Nobody talked about God. Nobody. And I remember sitting there, and it was like a family outing, okay? You went and you sat as a family, and it's a family outing, okay? There was nothing about your individual craving and your soul desire to be close to your Creator. And I really, and that's why the rituals of whether to be the rabbi or to put on the tefillin or to put on the kippah or to put on the talis, those rituals seem like my avenue, because that's all I saw. Like there was like these physical things, and when you go down there, it is not satisfying. It's not completely satisfying. And that's why you want more, just like you want more materialism. If I do more of these physical things or more of these, you really have to just rip it apart and pare it down and get to the core essence of what it's all about. This whole world is you and God. This whole world is you and God. That's what it is. And everybody who comes into your life, whether it's your professor or your spouse or your girlfriend or this kid or your employer or your next door neighbor or the president they're all there to bring you to God. That this is it. Like there used to be in the old movies, there's a cinematic technique where a guy walks into like a room where there's a party, and he sees a beautiful woman across the room, and their eyes lock. And it's a cinematic technique that everybody freezes.
Stupid.
Everybody is, and he walks in, and the music swells, okay? That's this world. Sometimes we have to freeze everything around us and realize they're all there to bring me to the ultimate. And what we do is we point and we complain, and if this was this, and then we grab onto any ism except for Judaism, because we grew up with not a spiritual feeling about Judaism. My husband always says, if a Jew goes into Barnes & Noble and is looking for a book on spirituality, are they more likely to pick up a book on Judaism or Buddhism? Buddhism, of course, because they're spiritual, okay? And if you pare down the essence of Buddhism, when it's talking about that everything happens for a reason, and that's and the concept of karma, it's Jewish. So what we do is the world starts repackaging it in this bestseller or this ism, and even that's why who are the leaders of feminism, as Ruchi said? It was Jewish women. Who are the leaders of communism? Jews. We're into every ism because what is it? We're seeking God, we're seeking meaning, we're seeking purpose. But if it's not going to go into Judaism because we're given a dreidel, give your money to Israel bonds kind of Judaism growing up, then it's going to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere.
Lori, what would you recommend women who are looking to be more spiritual, as women are, what are there any specific mitzvahs that you would recommend they connect to as a way of finding that spirituality?
So I listen, you could talk generally, okay? Everybody should light Shabbat candles. It's beautiful. Or like the mitzvah of challah or the mitzvah of mikvah. They're all beautiful, and those are very essence. But you really have to look at the individual woman. Everybody's different. Everybody's just like you like Shoshana was saying, you raise a child according to their way. You also have to, like, your students are like your children. And you have to know who this person is and it may be more of an intellectual avenue and in terms of study that is going to bring her closer to God. For somebody else, it's going to be like some sort of positive action that she's going to do. You really have to know who she is. I think that if a person in general starts talking to God, if you have a relationship, you're in a relationship and you have a relationship with God, that I'm telling you, I really very, very strongly feel that prayer, and when I say prayer, I don't mean that you are necessarily in a synagogue, that you are saying words that maybe you don't even understand. I'm talking about connecting to the Almighty.
Intimate conversation.
Yes, if you have somebody and you say, oh, I'm very close with that person. We're like this, we're so close. Really? When's the last time you talked to them? You know, like, oh, like it's been 10 years and I don't even know what's going on in there. Like, if you have a relationship, and relationship means communication. So just in your own words, from your soul, from your heart and soul, just talk to God. Thank him, ask him for things. You're in a relationship, and God is not going to talk back to you in a cloud, and he's not going to talk back to you on a mountaintop. And if that happens, there are therapists in your community that we can recommend. But God is talking to you when people come into your life, when things happen. The Almighty's talking to you loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, we have 2 minutes for a comment from either Rochi Koval or Shanake on this, and specifically, if women are searching and they say, you know, sort of like, give it to me while I'm standing on one foot, if you will, like, what is something that I should be looking to, as a spiritual woman who's looking to connect to Judaism, what is something that I should maybe, you know, look into more or connect to? Lori spoke about talking to God, you know, not only necessarily prayer in the sense of synagogue prayer, but just talking to God himself. Is there anything that you would recommend to women, maybe Shanake with students? Do college students approach you about this?
So I happen to be giving a daily life class on Torah Anytime Now on prayer, and Rachi wrote her book on prayer. I can't speak for Rachi, but my college students, when they are really ready to grow and they want connection, prayer is what we do. It is never any student that says, you know, I'm going to start putting on skirts or I'm going to start keeping kosher. I'm like, wait! It has to be that there is a foundation. We cannot build a house when there's no foundational structure. And for me, I see that for Judaism, how can you have a relationship with your Creator if there's no intimacy? And we all know that one of the greatest conduits to intimacy is communication. So I agree with you, Lori. Like prayer, and if you really do want to continue on a growth-oriented trajectory, then there's this great book by this woman named Rochi Koval.
I was going to say it would be weird if she had some other type of mitzvah that people could connect to other than this point.
But I really feel it's really important, and learning about formal prayer. Even though Lori's 100% right, just talk, open the most intimate way. We learn about how to pray from Hannah when she begged God for her son Shmuel, for Samuel. It was as if she was drunk. She was whispering intimate whispers to Hashem, to God himself. We just have to open our mouth. But if we want even more, we can learn about formal prayer and the depth that's behind it. And Rocky.
Okay. Here's a question that's very contemporary. And people have emailed in a lot about this. I'm sure that you've gotten this as well. In general, people are looking to live their lives with vibrancy and joy, specifically women, amidst challenges, right? How do we handle the challenges of life, big and small, that inevitably come our way, specifically with Corona, kids, families, breakdowns? How your advice to women on juggling all this. I'll go back to you, Lori, if you don't mind. Just, balancing and juggling all this amidst the challenges, specifically with what the world is going through now.
So first of all, I would tell women, You're doing amazing, okay? Like, you go, girl. You're doing amazing. This is not normal. If I made a list of all the, if I made a list, Shoshana, maybe mute. Is that okay? Yeah, just mute yourself. Atta girl. Okay, so if I made a list of all the things that could cause pressure in a marriage or in a family situation, okay? If one of them, if you came to me in counsel and you said one of these things on the list is in my life, now I understand why you're going through a hard time. So let's make the list, okay? Financial insecurity, job insecurity, illness, lack of like a death. If I'm telling you, I could go on, and when I'm talking to women now, they're like, check, 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 check. You got them all. So what does that mean? The fact that you're watching this and you're standing, okay, and you're alive, you're awesome. Having said that, everybody around you is also in a not normal situation, a high pressured situation, an insecure situation, a frightening situation. You may have a husband who is normally not around all the time, who's not in your zone usually, who is also wants to protect you, wants to save the family, wants to be there, but is going through his own fears and insecurities. What does that mean? Everybody gets a hall pass. I don't mean in abuse, God forbid, God forbid. If you're in an abusive situation, nobody gets a hall pass. You do not pass go directly to get help now. But the 99% of families, this is the reason why a lot of people are short-tempered and there's conflict going up and things are rising is because of our situation. So this is not a time to judge people because they're not at their best. But I do have to say that the Almighty God put the whole world in a timeout. Okay, so why do you put your kids in a timeout? You put your kids in a timeout because you want to stop the conflict. You want them to think about their actions. You want them to come out better people. But your kids come out and they go, sorry, okay, to the other kid. Well, that's not a real sorry. The whole world was put in a timeout because we have to think about our actions and we have to think about what we've been doing. If we don't come out different people, if we go back to the way it was, this was for nothing. It was for nothing. We must examine, and no rabbi can say, this is why God's doing this to the world. But you can ask yourself, why is God doing this to me? And people are saying, like, we're all in the same boat. We're not. We're all in the same storm, but your boat is different than my boat. Right? Because your family situation is different than mine. And what did the Almighty do in this timeout? He turned on a spotlight. Some things we see in that spotlight in our homes. I always say this is a combination of Gilligan's Island and the Jetsons, okay? So Gilligan's Island, because we're shipwrecked with these people, and you never have to wonder, like, if I was shipwrecked on a desert island, who would I want to be with? God already decided. You don't have to wonder. But it's also the Jetsons, because we got all this technology, and we can see each other, and the Almighty made it easier for us in this situation. But this spotlight, again, I realized I don't just love my husband. I like him. Not all the time, okay? We have our moments, but I like him. Some people but sometimes the spotlight is showing us things that we weren't dealing with before, but the Almighty wants us to deal with it. And because we were running and doing, we never even saw it. One of the women said to me, my college-age son came home and he was shipwrecked with us. Okay, we're in quarantine together. I always thought we had a great relationship. I realize now he hates me. He hates me. And I didn't even know. And I said to her, thank God you know, because now you can do something about it. Because sometimes we put things on hold. And another woman said to me, I always thought my husband, he was like social drinker. My husband, I realized now that we're in quarantine, he's an alcoholic. Is my marriage over? No, your marriage is not over. But thank God you see it. We need to see the good and we need to see the challenging, and we need to embrace this opportunity to get back on course. That when we come out, we are different people. When we first were in quarantine, I remember coming down and my husband said, there's no water. Like, they cut off the water. Like, we live in Jerusalem. I'm like, they cut off the water? He goes, if you had a choice between no water or no Wi-Fi, what would you pick? I go, no water. He goes, we have Wi-Fi. Woo-hoo. Okay. So that became our theme, that we're always focusing on what we have and what we don't have, because there's so much to be grateful for, so much. But we have in the morning here, the birds are singing And they wake you up at dawn, literally at dawn, okay? Like 5:45, the birds are singing. And a few days into quarantine, I said to my husband, they're singing all day long. Do you hear them? They're singing all day long. It's like we step back from the world and they're singing Shir to Hashem. They're singing a song to the Almighty. Like you see, like the world starts healing. The skies in LA are clean. Okay, the water's clean. The birds are singing. And then a few days more, I said, Yaakov, maybe they were singing all along. We just weren't listening. So this is a time to see and to listen.
Amazing. Any of the other Rebbetzin in the comment about being able to juggle it all during challenging times such as these, specifically for women who are juggling a lot during these times?
Yeah, I sort of have like a 4-part formula, and it's not specific to this pandemic at all. It's it's no secret that I've gone through some very difficult things with my kids, and other people go through very difficult things in their marriages or in their finances. So what I'm about to say is by no means specific to this pandemic. I think it's in general. Living life is not always an easy adventure. So I would say number 1 is feel your feelings. We were talking before about building an intimate relationship with God. God is big enough and loves you enough to handle your anger, your pain, your disbelief. Some people think, well, if I'm a good Jew, I'll just say, well, everything happens for a reason. God doesn't give you anything you can't handle, and all these other mantras. You have to feel your feelings first. I mean, this is true psychologically and this is true spiritually. If you have an emotion, like we were saying, you're in a relationship with God, you have an emotion, you can say, oh, I can't share that emotion with God. We're not that close. You have to be able to say, this hurts, this is painful, this is scary, I'm afraid, I'm terrified, I'm angry. That's number 1. Number 2, and this is such a buzzword, and this can also get radicalized, but self-care. Any woman who is juggling whatever, you have to take care of yourself. There are so many women who are in this martyred workaholic mode that they're going to take care of everyone, and they're going to homeschool their kids, and they're going to bake banana bread, and they're going to, write thank you notes to all the firefighters, and they're going to, and be super Jew at the same time. That is utterly ridiculous. You have to take care of yourself. You have to meet your needs. You have to, let yourself off the hook. And then there are some people who do too much of that because it's all about Netflix and wine. Okay, here comes number 3. Number 3 is other care. Of course you have to feed yourself. That's so that you can have a full tank to feed others. So sometimes you have to get out of your own head and get out of your own self-pity and figure out how to give to another human being. That human being might be your child, it might be your spouse, it might be your parent, it might be an elderly neighbor, it might be FaceTiming with someone who lives across the world. But so many times the way that we can manage our own pain is by becoming somebody who is relevant to other people. I have something to give, I have something to share, and it makes you feel amazing. It doesn't solve whatever else is going on in your life, but it adds such a strong dimension of meaningfulness. And finally, number 4 is faith. And this is not some linear path, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, or it's not okay, now I got to the finish line. It can be back and forth multiple times a day or several times a week or a couple times a year. But this is faith, and this is everything happens for a reason. God loves me. I'm here to live my best life. Only God knows what I need to live my best life. These challenges are going to grow me. These challenges are going to transform me. And this is what I need. Just to throw in quickly, we were talking before about equality. With all these conversations that have been happening nationally about equality is not actually the goal. Equity is the goal. Equity is where, I saw this picture of these people of different heights and they're all trying to see over the fence. Equality is where you give everybody the same size stool. Equity is where everybody gets the stool that's the right height so that they can see over the fence. God did not create us all equal, contrary to whatever the United States of America has to say. As Lori said, just look around. Are we all the same? We are not all the same. People have higher IQ. Some people are super charismatic. Some people have a lot of money. Some people are super lonely. But God did give us equity. He gives us what we need to see over the fence.
I think I'll also just quickly put in there's such beautiful answers. So just to give some context to my situation, I'm raising special children and special children. And my special children are, sometimes I feel, one of my kids, we grew up with one of my kids saying, Ma, I wish this particular child had Down syndrome, because then the whole world would know. That's number 1. So raising children with challenges and then children with specific special needs is like a whole world in itself. 4 years ago, after my sixth, I had my sixth child, Sarala, I was paralyzed 3 months later from the waist down and told I may never walk again, and discovered that I have an autoimmune illness that is never going away, and I could wake up tomorrow again to not walk again. And then as you announced, Rev Freeman, I have 2 very large positions and a young family. My youngest is only 4, so ranging from 16 to 4, and it's hard. It's very hard. Our family was actually featured for a whole year in a magazine, and we have a book coming out in about 6 months, written about the challenges that our family has gone through over the last 15 years, specifically with one of my kids and my own illness and facing an illness. So for me, I feel that like sometimes, you know, I love people who say, well, God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. I'm like, well, he made a mistake with me. Like, I can't handle this, or it's too, you know, or like God knows which address to send challenges to him. Sometimes I feel, well, it was the wrong address. Maybe it should have gone to a different address. So I really feel in my life, especially since I got sick, that was my tremendous gift from God for me. On the, because they didn't know what was wrong with me, I had every single test you could possibly imagine. And one of the tests found a precancerous cyst that would have metastasized within 4 years. And I would have had stage 4 active colon cancer. And that would have been now. So I was 37. I just turned 42. So 41, they said I would have, you know, really been battling a cancer that probably I wouldn't have been able to fight. So people always say to me, wow, so you got sick so that your life could be saved. And I say, yeah, that's pretty cool. But no, that's like, yeah, I guess so. But that's not why I'm so grateful to Hashem that I got sick. I'm so grateful to Hashem that I got sick, because when the most basic things are taken away from you, you come to appreciate the most insignificant things. It took me 6 weeks to move my toes and move my ankles. 6 weeks of OT and PT that I thought I was going to die from. And, you know, when was the last time, and whenever I give this talk, when was the last time like anyone ever wiggled their toes and said, thank you, God, that I can wiggle my toes. So for me, overcoming difficult times and difficult challenges, I have three acronyms that I use. So first of all, it's ego. Whenever I'm living in ego, I know that I'm edging God out. And when I'm edging God out, I'm living in Shoshana's world. If I'm living in Shoshana's world, forget it. No ways. I have to live with a God-centered lens to understand that there's something much bigger and much greater, and I'm just part of this plan. The next thing is pause. I try and pause, pray, and use spiritual energy. I try and take a moment to just focus and figure out what is going on around me, that it's not just the here and now, there's something much bigger. And then I get into my favorite acronym, which is DRAG. DRAG is drama, radical acceptance, and gratitude. What is the drama piece? If I want to, the drama piece is that each and every one of us are given a script. And my job today, the last 4 years, how I've been living, is just to play the best part that I possibly can. I'm not the director. I'm just another actor in this show. And I want to win an Academy for today. I take it one day at a time. Radical acceptance is I feel my feet on the ground, and this is the situation. This is the situation with my children. This is the situation with my health. This is the situation with my own anxiety, fear, stress, whatever it is. And I live in that. And then the final thing, which is the overarching major thing, is gratitude. The more we look around us and we amass our wealth with the blessings, like Lori said, of that which is, not that which isn't. The more we look at all the things that we have and start to focus on all the things that the gratitude, even within the things that we don't have, magnificent things start to happen. It's like a whole spiritual system where God ends up sending us more things to be grateful for. The more grateful we are, the more things that we come to have the ability to be grateful for. And I really think that in my situation, I do not have an easy life. And I am so grateful for the ability to, one day at a time, hone in on the spiritual connection that I have with my Creator and all the blessings that I have. And I think during Corona, we can all finally say, like Lori said, we're in this together, but in our own boats. We're all going through challenges, major, major challenges, and living life according to God's plan, acting the best way that I possibly can, radical acceptance and gratitude, and taking a moment to pause is the way that I get through difficult times.
Shoshana, that was so beautiful.
Wow. There's nothing left to say after this.
Wow.
It's
The sign over your shoulder, life is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Ruchi, you're amazing, and you're like a flower in that garden you're outside. And it was really a privilege and an honor to be part of this.
And I want to thank you, Rebbitzins, really for. I know it's not easy to to give this amount of time in challenging times, but I believe that people that are watching this are getting a tremendous amount of encouragement, to both for them and their families to be able to get through these times and to recognize, like all of you mentioned, to connect to God and to appreciate what we have, the gratitude piece. And I really thank you on behalf of Project Inspire, all of us. Thank you for joining us and for really giving the insight and giving us the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Project Inspire. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A shout out, because Lori, I know that for so many of us, whether it's Rebbitzins or lay people, whether in the religious world or wherever people are on the spectrum, you have been such a guiding light for so many of us about so many of the topics that we've talked about. I know you're a personal mentor of mine, and I just want to say that you are doing an incredible, incredible thing for the Jewish people. I'm honored to know you.
Thank you, Ruchi.
And I'll say that many women who will be watching this feel the same.
And thank you, Project Inspire. You guys are also doing tremendous work. I know your Friday show is reaching thousands and thousands of people. I mean, just putting out quality content all the time. It's just really unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is at the top of the list, though.
Thank you so much, Project Inspire. And I want to tell you that it's the first time in 4 months that I've done anything live that my children have not video bombed the occasion, except for just now. So it must be a testimony to the amazing work and efforts you're doing. And Lori, it was so nice. I remember years and years back, you probably don't even remember, you were giving a class in East Village, Toronto. I think I was at the beginning of my journey, and it's great to be able to, very humbling to be able to sit on a panel. And Ruchi, I hear all about you from like all the amazing women that I get to work with. And here I am finally meeting you over Zoom. So nice. Thank you.
But the real reason your kids behave is because you got permission from Lori for them not to behave.
Yes. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Bye, Rabbi.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Yossi Friedman from Project Inspire, and I'm back for a little bit of a special edition here. I wanted to get a chance to catch up with Shoshana Kay, who has been on our panel, specifically because questions have come in with regard to mikvah and marriage specifically. And Shoshana Kay is the National Program Director of My Gift of Mikvah, which is a program of Mikvah USA, something that you're very familiar with. I know that I'm disturbing you. You're able to get away a little bit, but I appreciate your time as always to be able to continue our panel discussion. If you don't mind, I have 2 questions left to ask you.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me back. I took Ruchi Koval's self-care so seriously that I left the day we recorded.
Well, I didn't take her advice so seriously, so I guess it was really only for women. Anyway, okay. So, Shoshana, this is a question that's come in. There have been different variations of the question. Obviously, people hear, there's misconceptions, there's all types of, rumors, if you will. But specifically, these are the 2 questions regarding mikvah specifically that have come in. I wanted to, get your take on it. 1A of this question is, how do I infuse intimacy and connection in my marriage? It seems that whenever I try, my husband gets more distant. And B of that is, what role could mikvah play in upgrading our marriage and keeping it strong? You could please enlighten us.
These are great questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman, for having me back with Project Inspire. I'm really inspired by what you are all doing, and that's why I was willing to interrupt my vacation for you. So both are really amazing questions. The first question, how do I infuse my relationship with more intimacy, especially when my husband is potentially giving me pushback? I would say the most important thing, the first thing before we look at another person, is we have to look at ourselves. Especially within a marriage, we can so easily look at our husbands and say, if only he was giving me more attention, if only he was loving me more, if only we had more date nights, then I would love him more, then there would be more intimacy. And it's interesting, we learn so much about the wisdom of Judaism from the dikduk, from the grammar of it. The word ahava, which we all know, love, also shares the same root as the Aramaic word lahav, which means to give. We think oftentimes in our relationships that I will love you more, my spouse, my partner, if you give to me more. But Judaism says no. I will love you more, my partner, if the more that I give to you. And the more that I give to you, the more there will be love and intimacy in the relationship. So how do we give when we feel like we're always giving? So it starts, first of all, the fact that you ladies are watching this and that you're interested in growing spiritually, it starts with working on yourself and recognizing what can you do to infuse yourself with more life? What can you do to infuse yourself with more energy? Are you the person that you were when you got married? Are you still have that same vitality and energy that you did? And oftentimes as marriages move on in the years, we don't. So the first thing I would say is that women need to do everything they can to fill their cup. And once their cup is filled, giving in our relationship, Rachel Goldbaum, my partner in Mikveh USA, always says that there's 3 A's that this type of advice doesn't apply for, which is adultery, addiction, and abuse. So as long as there's not those 3 things, marriage advice can really be given to any marriage where there's not that level of dysfunction. So the idea is that in giving, in spending time, in investing in the relationship, and invest in it not necessarily in the way that you want, invest in it in the way that your husband would want. A very funny story, several years ago, my husband decided to take us on a really romantic date. And I was like, wow, I'm so excited. This is so much fun. He planned a whole night. And all of a sudden we're driving in Philly, and I feel like we're not in Kansas anymore. Like, what is going on? We are not on the right side of the tracks. So my husband is smiling from ear to ear, and I'm thinking, like, this is his romantic date. He's taking me into the ghettos of Philadelphia. And he's like, okay, we're here, come out. I'm like, I don't want to get out of this car. And at the time I was teaching marriage class and speaking about the importance of giving to your spouse the way they want to be given to. And there I am sitting in the car. I barely want to move. And he goes, come on, we're here. I'm like, where? I get out the car and I see like Shalom gun range. I think it's myself. You're joking. You've taken me to a gun range for a romantic date. He's like, isn't it so much fun? And I realized in that moment, wow, I could have really sulked, like, is this what you call romantic? This seems like a nightmare. Or I could have said, this is my opportunity to give to my husband, to do what he wants to do, and really put myself in his shoes. We ended up having a great time. It's a big joke that I actually was a better shooter than him, but we try not to talk about that too publicly now that it's on Project Inspire. And but that's always resonated with me, this idea that in that moment I could have been so resentful. I could have felt like, what, are you kidding? But what came as a result of that, out of letting go of what my needs were in that moment, it was so much more beneficial to investing in the relationship. So let's just leave with 3 specific things based on your first answer, and then we'll get to mikvah. Number 1, if you want more intimacy, stop looking at what's lacking, start looking at all that there is. Number 1, make a gratitude list of all the amazing things that your husband is. And don't even tell him, read it every single day, all the character traits. What's so crazy is when couples start to do this, they come up with 3, 4, 5 things. And I say, you got married to your spouse for eternity for 5 things? There's no way. Go back to those days where there was butterflies and excitement. What is your husband really about? And when women really work on this project, all of a sudden it starts growing and growing. And they don't tell their husband about it. They read it every day and they write their gratitudes about their spouse, all the amazing things about him and all the things you can be grateful. And suddenly your husband's going to start to ask, is something going on? You're acting differently. What's really going on? So that's number 1. Focus on the gratitude and all the gifts that your husband possesses. And really work on it. 6 weeks, you're going to notice such a difference. Number 2, give to your husband in the way that he wants to be given to. And number 3, make sure that you're filling yourself up. Become the person that your husband would want to be intimate with. And it's not often based on our physical appearance. It's based on what we are emanating externally. Is that satisfactory to you, Rabbi Friedman?
It's more than satisfactory.
Okay.
B of that was specifically, where does mikvah play a role, and
Okay.
that's certainly the misconceptions that people have about it.
mikvah, as working full time as regional director for Maor, when we launched My Gift of Mikvah 2 years ago, and everyone said, "You're going to be a national program director of a second organization? Are you out of your mind?" I said, "No, we must do this, because there are so many women. I've come across so many women, regardless of where they fall on the Jewish spectrum, who are denied the privilege and the gift of mikvah observance." And My Gift of Mikvah, everyone was making fun of the name when we started. I said, no, because Mikvah USA wants to give women access, regardless of where they fall in the Jewish spectrum, access to unwrapping the magnificent gift of mikvah. So what is this magnificent gift? So we all know that in our relationships at a certain time, like it's actually a study that's being done around the 7 to 10 year mark, called the 7 to 10 year itch, that relationships that are not engaged in mikvah observance, or the laws of family purity, as we call it, their intimate life becomes quite monotonous. And there's challenges around, a lot of times, challenges around that situation. And it comes out as a result in the dynamics of the relationship. The gift of mikvah for each and every woman, it's not only the gift for a lady's family, it's the gift of empowerment that we give ourselves. See, when we are immersing in a mikvah after our 7 day, after our menstrual cycle, the gift that we are giving ourselves is the gift of renewal, the gift of transition, the gift of transformation. And water, what is so magnificent about water? Water is the only entity that goes from solid to liquid to gas to solid to liquid. As women, we're changing all the time. My moods can go from happy to sad to positive to low energy. That's what we are as women. We enter the waters of the mikvah, the spiritual, magnificent waters of the mikvah, and we are entering with a sense of tikva. Mikvah and tikva. The word tikva is hope. Mikvah and tikva share the same root, that we enter these waters with a hope. What is the hope for? A hope that we too, through the process of these waters, through the process of immersing, have the ability to change ourselves, to infuse our families with spirituality, and infuse our relationships with greater intimacy and a greater connection. So mikvah isn't only about the marital relationship. It's about me and taking ownership of myself as a woman, my physical body, my spiritual body, and taking the time out to say, I have the potential to be recreated, and that I'm not a static being. I can change. And if I can change, my relationships can change. And what's so magnificent in the cessation of intimacy, because we do take a break when a woman is menstruating, and then there is a time period afterwards. In that cessation of intimacy, each time a woman and her husband are together again, they get to experience a newness, a freshness to their intimate life. And that's a gift that is a really, really amazing thing for the relationship. So oftentimes, when going back to your first question, we think that, how do I have more intimacy? I have to add more intimacy into my relationship. There has to be more sexuality and sensuality in my relationship. And the truth of the matter is that as a result of ceasing, for taking a break and focusing on ourselves and building the relationship, building the emotional communication, the emotional connection, not being able to touch once there's been a negativity or anger between you, and having to truly express your inner feelings, the relationship, a foundation is created in a magnificent way, and the couple is infused with a new start.
Amazing. We have 2 minutes before I let you go over here. Just to address one question. People are feeling, we touched on this a little bit during the panel, that people are feeling, in a challenging time. I'm trying so hard. I feel like I'm doing all I can to turn my situation around in my family, in my marriage, physically, spiritually. Why aren't things getting better? What does God want from me? Does he really care? How does that, fit into the faith that we're supposed to have in God, to give us the good life?
That's an amazing question, and thank you for asking it. For the, as I think I had mentioned, we have a book coming out about our family's life story, and it was featured in these magazines. And the last chapter that I happened to have written, I spoke about this exact concept, that there is a psalm that there is a psalm, Keli, Keli, lama azavtani, my God, why have you forsaken me? And for years, when I was raising my oldest son, I felt for 12 years, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Hashem, where are you? And here I am, this religious woman. Why is it so hard? And it was when I got sick that all of a sudden my mind was opened up to the realization, it's not my God, why are you forsaking me? It's my God, in the process of feeling forsaken, you are merely forming me. We know that any parent that loves and cares for their children, that we are helping our children when our children are doing something that requires some structure or discipline. When we do it with love, there's nothing more magnificent. In these times, of course, we could feel like, where's God? But let me tell you, God is wherever, Hashem is wherever you let him in. He's watching you and he believes in you. I'm going to end off with this, but every morning people say, but how can I do it? It's so hard. I can't go on like this. Your job right now, each and every one of us, our job is to just do it for one day at a time. And Judaism gives us this magnificent war cry, Modeh-ani lefanecha. We wake up and the first thing we do in the morning is we say, Modeh-ani lefanecha. I'm grateful before you, Melech Chai v'Kayam, living eternal God, Shehechazarta b'nishmasi, that you replaced my soul in me, b'chemla, with compassion. And then we say the weirdest thing, Rabba emunasecha. We say, abundant is your faithfulness. Now, growing up, I used to watch Baptist priests, and if you're lucky enough, you sometimes get it. But I remember them, I never heard them say like, praise the Lord, I believe in you, God. Your faith is abundant. They didn't speak like that. They did not preach that way. They, Lord, I believe in you. I believe in you, God. So why in Judaism, every day we wake up and we say, your faith, God, is abundant? Because Hashem, our Father and our King, he knew that we would wake up some days feeling anxious, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like it's too much, that I can't. And God says, you know what? I'm giving you another 24 hours to get this life of yours right. And even though you may believe you can't, I know you can. I believe in you. I'm with you. Just give it one more day, the best that you possibly can. And that's it. We cannot, no rabbi or no rebbitzin can answer why we're going through what we're going through. The word why is lama. Why? But when we break it down in Hebrew to lema, for what? That takes us to a different place. We can't ask so much why. We have to ask for what. And for each and every one of us, it's to help us become the best version of ourselves that we can possibly be in our marriages, in our parenting, in our own individual existence. So thank you, Project Inspire, for having me. I'm doing it right alongside you every day, Modeh-ani lefanecha, one day at a time. I've been doing it for many, many years, and you can do it. And the more you do it, and the more you come to see, wait, God is with me, the more blessings come down in abundance.
Absolutely fantastic. And I appreciate it. I know that we disturbed you in the middle of your mini vacation over there, so go back to it. Thank you very much again thanks for joining us the first time. Thanks for this special edition.
My pleasure. Thank you, Project Inspire. You're doing amazing things. Keep inspiring all of us. You're really fantastic. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman.
Take care.
Hey everybody, this is David Sussman, and I'll be your first presenter here in a 4-part series being brought to you by Project Inspire. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to Rabbi Simcha Barnett and Rabbi Yosef Friedman and to everyone at Project Inspire for coming up with creative and innovative ways to bring Israel into your homes and connect you to your Jewish identity and, of course, our shared heritage, and for remembering us tour guides who have been suffering quite a lot here during this pandemic period. So thank you again for making this all possible. This is a 4-part series. Today, myself, David Sussman, will be bringing you to the Golan Heights in Israel's north. I'll be followed by Rabbi Ken Spiro and Patrick Amar, who will be bringing you to various sites in the city of Jerusalem. And last but definitely not least, Steve Gar, who will be bringing us to the holy city of Hebron, and the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. All of these tours will be excellent for you and your families to connect with Israel. And if you haven't signed up for the future tours, make sure you do so. And I hope you enjoy today's tour of the Golan Heights. Today, we are focusing on the beautiful Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is a small, parcel of land, although you wouldn't think that with the amount of attention it receives in the media today. But it's only roughly about 50 miles long and maybe 13 miles wide at its widest point. But strategically speaking, this cliff and plateau is seriously important for the safety and protection of the entire nation of Israel. What are the boundaries of the Golan Heights? Well, to the north, you have the large Mount Hermon, rising 10,000 feet above sea level. It even boasts its own ski resort. To the south, you have the Yarmouk River, which flows into the Jordan River. And at that point, you have Syria, Jordan, and Israel all touching one another at a beautiful place called Hamoed, these great hot springs that one can visit on their trip here to the Golan. To the east, you have the Rakad River, and to the west, behind me, you got the gorgeous Hula Valley, one of the bread baskets of Israel. But it always wasn't a bread basket. In fact, that huge green lush area you see behind me was nothing but swampland for literally millennia. It wasn't until those modern Zionists came here, those stiff-necked Jews that we know we can be, that were so stubborn and refused to leave even though there was starvation and malaria there. They said, this is our land, we will make it bloom once again. Well, in the 1950s, with the help of the French, believe it or not, they built these trenches on the eastern and western side and drained the swamp, leaving behind black gold. No, not oil, but an extremely nutrient-rich soil that the farmers here in Israel took full advantage of. But like any human, we took too much advantage of it, and we over-tilled it, over-fertilized it, abused it. What happened was, in the early 90s, caverns opened up underground and spontaneously combusted. You had these infernos raging underground, which was destroying the vegetation up above. That's when Israel realized that by draining the swamp, we had caused severe ecological damage. So we reintroduced the swamp with the Hamoed Lake. In addition to reintroducing that swamp, we also reintroduced the traditional migration pattern of the birds traveling from Europe to the west and the rest of Asia to the east that are going down towards Africa for the winter and then back home for the spring and summer months, which makes Israel a prime location for bird watching. Literally 500 million birds each migration season passes through the land of Israel. Just look at some of these beautiful sites right here of that bird migration in the Hamoed Lake region. So, how do we get here? How did Israel take possession of the Golan Heights? So to answer that question, we got to go back to the Six-Day War, which takes place in June of 1967, because the entire Golan Heights was controlled by Syria between 1949 and 1967. And they built hundreds of bunkers like the one I'm sitting on right now that speckled the entire Golan Heights, and especially along the cliffs that look down onto the Hula Valley. Down below, you have dozens of kibbutzim and agricultural developments and thousands of Jews who were living there during that time. They were under constant threat by the Syrians, who were sitting in this bunker right here, staring down at them and occasionally firing upon them as well. Now, the Six-Day War was a miraculous war. I mean, they don't even teach the Six-Day War at West Point for military strategy, because it's it's mind-numbing. It's mind-boggling. We just can't understand it. It was miraculous, really. 6 days, a small nation, the nation of Israel, against the mighty Egyptian, I almost want to call it empire, like the mighty Egyptian army, which is funded and supplied with armament from the Russians as well as the Syrians. How in the world is Israel going to be victorious? In fact, we prepared for this war by digging mass trenches, not to stop tanks from entering Israel, but for burying our dead. That's how serious this was. We knew that Nasser, the Egyptians in Syria, that they were going to attack. They had thrown out UN peacekeepers and lined up their troops and their tanks and their armaments on our border near the Sinai Desert, near Eilat, stretching all the way up to the Gaza Strip. And we knew that we needed to strike first. So we flew in early in the morning, in the beginning of June, and literally just bombarded their entire air force, giving us supremacy of the air. Now, before we end our discussion about the war and the battles that took place here, I want to move to another site and I want to discuss an individual who may be one of the most major personalities of the 6-Day War, even though he died in 1965. So come with me. So I'm sure many of you saw the Netflix documentary about Eli Cohen called The Spy, Our Man in Damascus. So he's the individual who probably had the biggest impact on the 6-Day War here in 67, even though he died in 65. And that's because he went behind enemy lines as a spy, pretended to be a Syrian, and was so successful that he actually became friends with the president of Syria. In fact, some people say that he was one heartbeat away from becoming the president himself. That if the president had died, many people would have rallied behind Eli Cohen to become the next president of Syria. Just imagine that. Unbelievable character, lots to talk about him and lots to discuss, but we don't really have the time. But definitely look him up, and if you haven't seen The Spy on Netflix, you gotta watch it. It's really unbelievable. But here in the Golan, he told the generals and the Ministry of Defense in Syria to plant eucalyptus trees, like you can see behind me over there, to give shade for the soldiers and to build barracks here and to create some type of recreational activity, if there's living water, pools, places where people could cool off a little bit here in the hot summer. Well, this is also where later on the Syrians would actually put their stashes of weaponry, and when we came in 67, we knew exactly where to bomb because of these eucalyptus trees. And you can see bombed out bunkers all over the place, and you can still see a standing mosque right behind me where some of these Syrian soldiers would actually go and pray. And all of this amongst the beautiful Golan Heights that is so gorgeous right now, as we're still in the middle of winter, if you can believe that. There's a huge storm coming up here pretty soon, and but yet it's very green. The flowers are in bloom. There's snow on the Hamoed. The birds are chirping. The butterflies are flapping their wings all over the place. And here we are sitting in the middle of a war scene from 55 years ago, 1967. Anywho, let's move on and tap into some of the historical Jewish aspects of the Golan Heights. So come with me. Let's talk about the heyday of the Golan Heights, which is about 1,500 years ago during the Talmudic period, when there was over 200,000 people living here in the Golan. Now, put that in contrast with today's population, which is around 36,000, half of which are the Druze people, a minority living here in Israel, whom we'll talk about a little bit later during the show. Well, this Talmudic period, here in the Golan, with 200,000 people living here, spread out over 40 different villages with a population of roughly 5,000 in each. Their main source of income was olive oil. Olive trees grow great in this region. And there are many different stations to the pressing of olive oil. This is in fact the second station after they initially crushed the olives. They'd come here and put the sludge in these baskets, and with these weights press it down and extract even more oil. That oil was important because that was the oil of the day, right? Today, we need oil to run this world. Well, back then they needed olive oil. It's the way that people used to light their houses with candles on Shabbat, right? We still to this very day light our Shabbos candles usually with olive oil, or at least that's the best way. That's the optimum way to light your Shabbos candles, is using olive oil. And the Talmudic period is important in Judaism because that's when the oral Torah was codified. It's when we took all of that oral transmission from generation to generation to generation, all the way back to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai, when we received the written Torah. The oral Torah described how to fulfill those mitzvot. Well, that all ended after the destruction of the Second Temple, when the Romans kicked us out of Jerusalem and forbid one another from teaching Torah. So this great Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and the great Rebbeim of the time had this massive debate that lasted, many, many years in order to codify Jewish law known as halakha. But halakha doesn't really mean law. It comes from the word holech, which means to go. It's the way of the Jew. It's the lens in which we use to judge right from wrong in this world. Now, it has been expounded upon, where you have tens of thousands of books known as Sfarim, all about Jewish law, or the way of the Jew. And you have to understand that the rabbis that you're connected with, they're like PhD scientists in Jewish philosophy and the way of the Jew. They went and studied in a yeshiva for 10 years, for 15 years, and they didn't stop there. They continued to learn, and probably will all the way until they're 120. Well, Jewish law is so defined that it goes so far as to tell you what shoe to put on first. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're like, what shoe to put on first? Like, no wonder we're so neurotic, that, it guides our actions in life so precise. It tells us what shoe, I don't want that. Well, you know what? If you don't scratch the surface in Judaism, then all you will see is an ancient, archaic way of life. But all of these actions and all of these mitzvot that we have, as soon as you scratch that surface just a little bit and understand the reason behind it, then you'll see the beauty in all those actions. Now, which shoe do we put on first in the morning? We put the right shoe on first, because we want to step forward in life with the right foot, right? And the right side in Judaism represents chesed. It represents kindness. So when we get up in the morning, we put that right shoe on first. We are reminded that when we go downstairs and greet our spouses and our children and our family and our community and our workplace and whomever we come into contact that day, that we want to come in contact with them with kindness, with the right foot first. I'm just going to share a very, very quick story. I was doing a virtual tour in Yad Mordechai, and this place is on the border of Gaza, and they produce honey here in Israel. And we went out to the honeycombs, to the beehives, and we took out one of the combs, and it was covered, and it was all gray, and it had little bits and pieces of grass and leaves in it from, the bees coming back with the pollen and the honey. And it looked disgusting. And the beekeeper said, now take your nail and just make a small incision. And I did that, and all of that golden, beautiful honey started to pour out. That's the same here in Judaism. You need to scratch the surface. Ask the questions. Find out the meaning behind the commandments and the mitzvot in order to attain that higher sense of living that you can't get through our ancient way, the way of the Jew. Let's now head to a national park here known as Gamla to see the ruins of a Second Temple period village that existed here all the way up until the Romans came and destroyed it in the year 66 CE. So let's go. Unfortunately, the nature reserve here in Gamla is closed due to COVID-19, so we can't access the ruins that date back to the Second Temple period. But I do have some great footage from my television show, Land of the Bible, where we did a great show here pre-COVID time. So let's enjoy some of that footage, and I'll meet you with my friend Yaakov Sullivan, who's a captain in the 188th Tank Brigade, that was stationed here in the Golan Heights to talk a little bit about the logistics and what is happening here today, and of course the civil war that's been raging in Syria. The Golan Heights has been the scene of warfare for thousands of years. We can read in the Bible of the conquest of Joshua. We know that there was battles here during the First Temple period, as well as the Second Temple period. In fact, the ruins of a city you see behind me was one of the 3 fortified cities here in the Golan during the Great Revolt, where the Jews rebelled against the Romans. Well, the Romans sent their #1 general, a guy by the name of Vespasian, with 3 Roman legions to defeat that city. But the city was well fortified. And not only that, the only way to descend to the city was through a very narrow path. It's the same path that tourists can walk down today to visit those ruins. This gave the advantage to the Jews inside that city, and they were actually able to repel the Romans. Well, the Romans regrouped. They attacked the city again. They breached its walls, and they defeated the city, and all 9,000 people were eventually killed. Today, after excavations have taken place, tourists can visit the national park here in Gamla and see the ruins of that great battle. But not only that, archaeologists have discovered a 2,000-year-old synagogue, one of the oldest that has ever been discovered. So not only is a trip to Gamla an educational experience about the Great Revolt, but it's also a spiritual pilgrimage for many. Let's continue as we learn more about the modern battles that took place here on the Golan Heights. So here we are with my good friend, Major Yaakov Sullivan, who lives in a small yeshuv, a neighborhood known as Yonatan, and it's literally 7 miles from the border of Syria. How does that make you feel?
One, I talked about the period of time where there was no government here. That was a rare window of opportunity where the barriers fell down, and we had an opportunity to have a direct connection with the locals living here.
When you say barriers, you mean like the border?
The border didn't fall down. Actually, a new fence was built. But I mean the mental barrier. Meaning, if I wanted to contact a Syrian farmer 10 years ago, there was a government in between. I couldn't talk to the average local. Suddenly, the average local has no government. His son was just shot. There's no functioning medical system in Syria. There's no government. So he brings his son to the border with Israel. And an IDF soldier comes to the border and takes his son and saves his life in the hospital in Safed or Nahariya. And we're talking about over 6,000 Syrians treated in Israeli hospitals, over 1,400 Syrian children. Why did we do this? First of all, because we're Jewish. Secondly, because we realized that this is a key for the day after. We understood at some point the Assad regime, the Syrian regime, together with their Iranian friends, will take over the region again. And we were planting the seeds for the day after. Now, I told you Iran is trying to recruit here. They're having a very hard time. The locals are not just joining them, because if Iran wanted to use us as a common enemy with the locals and tell the locals, yes, we don't really get along, but you know what, there's Israel, they're the devil, let's fight them. We're not the devil anymore. They have to pay a lot of money, and several locals are joining them. I can tell you, David, in the past few months, there's been intensive riots against the Iranian regime, against the Iranian presence in southwest Syria. The locals actually assassinated the head recruiter for the Iranian militias, who was going around the villages trying to recruit young guys to come and join these anti-Israel militias, and they assassinated him, meaning something happened here. Today there's tens of thousands of Syrians in Syria today who are still wearing clothing they got from Israel, who might even be eating food they got by Israel, whose life was saved by Israel. And this is a game changer. This is something that gives me hope for a better future.
Wow, amazing. So hopefully this new administration in America will keep the sanctions on Iran, preventing more fighters from Hezbollah and militias funded again by Iran. and we'll continue the diplomatic work and building relationships across the border. I think this is all incredible. You also run a program called Slingshot. Now, a lot of our viewers out here, when COVID is over, please God will be soon, plan on bringing their families to Israel. So tell us a little bit about the program that you run here at Tel Saki.
Okay, so I'll say I served in the IDF for almost a decade, and today when I protected my country, I fought in the 2014 Gaza war, and when I left the Army 4 years ago, I found a way to continue to contribute aside from my reserve duty. So I explain to people from the world what's happening here and Israel's challenges so they can bring out our voices around the world, like we just explained. But also I do motivational speaking in the Army, and I try motivating the soldiers who are protecting our homeland. So aside from my motivational programs, I also make sure that every time, you've brought dozens of groups to the Golan, and we always go out and treat the guys and make sure, how much they know how many people love them in the world.
Well, incredible. As Major Sullivan said, I have brought dozens of groups to his presentation at Tel Saki, and everybody loves it. Meeting the soldiers, saying thank you to the soldiers, learning about the heroism from the various wars that were fought here, and of course the courageous activity that is taking place right now here in the Golan. Major, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you again soon in healthier times.
Amen.
One of the great things to do here in the Golan Heights is to visit one of the several wineries in the region. And wine from the Golan Heights is world renowned because the vineyards are grown in that volcanic rock that we talked about earlier, which gives the wine a real full-bodied flavor. Now, the biggest winery here in the Golan, and one of the most popular ones, is the Golan Heights Winery. And if you've been to Israel, most likely you've been here. They produce some excellent wines from the Hamoed, which is their least expensive, all the way up to the Yarden, which is their most expensive. Now, an interesting aspect of wine in Judaism, well, first of all, we need to realize is that it is a fundamental aspect of Judaism, right? We say Kiddush on Shabbat, the holiest day of the year, which we celebrate every week, on a glass of wine. Havdalah when we take Shabbat out. On Passover, we have 4 cups of wine. If you're a male and you had a Brit Milah, the moil who does the circumcision puts a drop of wine in your mouth. In ancient times, Israel was known to produce some of the best wines in the world. We exported a lot of our wines. So how come when people think of kosher wine, they think of Manischewitz, which is horrible? You got to be at least 70 years old to enjoy Manischewitz. My mother, God bless her soul, she's 82 years old. Every time that I visit her, she opens up the refrigerator and says, let's have a l'chaim, and she takes out some Manischewitz. And I'm like, Mom, we really have great kosher wine now. In fact, some of the wines here in Israel are winning awards around the world. I just want to share one incredible little story that I heard from, I believe his name was Yitzhak Flam, who owns the Flam Winery just outside of Jerusalem. He won an award in France, a wine competition, and during when he received the wine, they said, wow, it's amazing what you've been able to do with our grapes, particularly Chardonnay. And he says, you got it wrong. Chardonnay is not a French grape, it's an Israeli grape. Because when you take the word Chardonnay and you break it down to 2 Hebrew words, you get Sha'ar Adonai, which is God's name. Chardonnay, Chardonnay. Right? This is the gateway to heaven. And that's why on Shabbat, after a full week of working, back in the day in the fields, but today at the office, wherever it is, and always looking behind your shoulder, who's looking at you, checking your pockets, is somebody trying to rip you out, in the world. And then all of a sudden comes Shabbat and you're supposed to enter this spiritual time. How do you bring it down or bring it up in order to tap into the sanctity of this time? Well, you do it on a kos yain, on a glass of wine, Chardonnay, the gateway to heaven. So we can't come here to the Golan without talking about the Druze people, a very interesting minority living here in Israel, roughly about 120,000, and they are an intricate piece of the fabric of Israeli society. In fact, we have members of Knesset who are from the Druze people, and a large percentage of the males actually serve in the military here. Now, they're an offshoot of Islam coming out in the 11th century, and as a result, they were persecuted by the Muslims around the Middle East. So they sought out safety by settling in the valleys of the large mountainous region here near Mount Hermon and further north in Lebanon, in Syria, and even in Jordan. The community you see below me is called Migdal Shams, and this is the capital of the Druze people here in the Golan Heights. So we have a very special guest with us today from the Druze community. His name's Bougie. He's a guide here, showing people around and showing the hospitality of the Druze people. So he's going to tell us a little bit more about the life of the Druze here. In order to do this interview, we're just going to keep it safe, and then we're going to put on our mask. Bougie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time and telling us a little bit about your people. So please tell us a little bit about the livelihood, what you guys do here. I mean, it is so beautiful, so take it away.
Hello, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I want to tell you a little bit about Migdal Shams in the beginning. Migdal Shams is, it's about 11,000 people live here, and all of them are Druze except for about maybe 2-3 families are Christians. And it's a very nice place, as you can see.
Beautiful.
Like in spring, in summer, and in winter you have the ski, you have the tourism here.
Yeah, there's not so much snow. I thought there'd be a lot more snow.
Yeah, well, it's coming in 2 days.
2 days, big storm.
There's a big storm coming. Hopefully it won't be too much, actually.
Wow.
I want to say a few things about Migdal Shams. It's in the north, and here, if you can see behind me, you have the buildings. Where the buildings and the green starts, that's Syria there. So you
wow.
can
From our vantage point, you can actually see the fence.
Yeah,
So the buildings stop, you have a fence, and where it's green, that's Syria.
The buildings are right next to the fence. They live there. And we can actually see Syrian buildings as well on the other side.
Sure.
Syrian cars and all what you can see. And it's a very touristic place. We are famous with food. A lot of people come here for food, good hospitality, and very nice people, and come to ski. Also, talking about tourism, the main thing here is not only ski, it is the snow and ski, but also the cherries season, which is in May, June. It's full with tourism. Everyone comes here to eat right from the tree, as you know, this is the new organic. And something more about the Druze. The Druze they have always lived in on the mountains or higher places. Farming is in every Druze village. You see farmers, and they are hardworking. As to holidays, we have one holiday the whole year, which is nothing. Then we don't have another holidays like Shabbat for the Jewish and stuff. So they always work. So they are hardworking people.
So are you looking forward to the snow coming in a couple days, and maybe Israeli tourists? Obviously international tourists can't come here today, but Israeli tourists?
Yeah, hopefully without the corona it was a lot better.
Sure.
Hopefully it will continue to be good, and hopefully there will be some skiing this year with the situation experience.
Well, you know, my kids, who are 6.5, have never really had a memorable experience in the snow. So maybe after this storm, you know, we could come visit and maybe stay by you.
Of course, you're more than welcome.
Bougie, you've been great. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. And let's continue as we explore more of the Golan Heights.
Thank you very much.
One can't talk about the wars that took place here in the Golan Heights without visiting what is now known as the Valley of Tears, where an incredible battle took place during the Yom Kippur War of 1973. And it's called the Yom Kippur War because on October 6, 1973, Syria surprise attacked the nation of Israel. That's right, on our holiest day, the Syrians bombarded the northern region of Israel, and here in the Golan Heights, which was liberated, as we discussed earlier, in 1967. Now, all of the trees you see planted here were planted in memory of the soldiers who fell in battle in this incredible site. The reason why it's called the Valley of Tears is from all of the loss of life that took place here during the Yom Kippur War. Now, just imagine, first of all, it's Yom Kippur. It was a surprise attack. The only soldiers here defending Israel from the Syrians were two tank brigades. You had the 77th and the 188th. The 77th, which was located here in the northern part of the Golan Heights, was led by Colonel Avigdor Kahalani. And he tells about the battles that took place during the 6th and the 7th of October. That the fighting became so close to one another that you couldn't even see the difference between the Israeli lines and the Syrian lines. And no place is that depicted better than right here, where you literally have an Israeli tank almost touching a Syrian tank. Now, these tanks were brought here later on. They weren't actually this close, but they were dozens of feet apart from one another when the commander of this tank saw the Syrian tank. And first of all, just look at the two tanks, okay? The Israeli tank, outdated. It's like ancient in those times. Okay, Israel, of course, added some armament and added new technology inside, but this is like ancient technology compared to the incredible T-62 night vision capability, precision shooting tanks that were given to the Syrians by who else other than the Russians. That's right, the Russians supplied all of this, and all of these tanks are coming in. We were so outmatched, both in number as well as the technology. However, where we reign supreme is with the heart, the devotion, the passion, and the understanding that a battle for Israel is a battle of life and death. And because of that, the soldiers here were able to fight with such incredible bravery that even though they found themselves just literally dozens of feet apart from one another, they were able to load the cannon, shoot the tank, defeat the Syrians, and lead them, or should I say push them, into any retreat. And then we did our counter-offensive, right? We actually did an offensive against the Syrians and pushed them back into Syrian territory that we were literally in cannon shot of their capital, the city of Damascus. Unbelievable bravery that has now given us this beautiful valley, which is known as the Valley of Tears, but now maybe it should be known as the Valley of Blessings, because as you look around, you can see how green, how lush, how beautiful it is, with vineyards and pastures and groves and orchards, and such incredible amount of life that is just blooming everywhere you look. And we have to thank the incredible soldiers who fought here during the Yom Kippur War. Nimrod's fortress is one of the largest fortresses that has been discovered from the medieval period, not just here in Israel, but all over the Middle East. Called Nimrod's fortress, dating back all the way to Nimrod from the book of Genesis, who was described as a mighty hunter. And the fortress here, which was built by the Mamluks in order to protect the major trade route, which consisted of the Hula Valley that we saw a little bit earlier, just a little bit to the west. And this trade route connected Beirut and Lebanon through the Hula Valley and then across the Golan Heights all the way to Damascus, making this an important junction. And the Mamluks who built this saw the importance and the strategic advantage of building this fortress up high so that you can see far and wide and protect your interests. Come, let's walk through the fortress and see some of the beautiful sights here. One of the most beautiful stelas, stone inscription that was discovered here in the land of Israel, and for sure here in the Golan Heights, has to be the Baibars inscription. The beautiful stone stela that we see here, chiseled out of limestone in Arabic, talks about the warrior Baibars who defended the Mamluk people and the Arabs who were living here in the land of Israel in the 13th century from the onslaught of the largest standing army ever assembled by man. And who are we talking about? Obviously not the Romans, but Genghis Khan and the Mongol world. They were heading south towards Africa, but it would be Baibars and the Mamluks who were living here that would stop them in their tracks, making Baibars one of the greatest warriors of all time. Just like any good fortress, Nimrod's fortress also has a secret exit. The secret exit is also equipped with special windows that are broad on the inside but narrow facing outside. And this was for archers to shoot their bow and arrows out the window at any advancement a army is making on them. So let's walk through the secret passage, check out some of those windows as we head out of this area. Hope you all enjoyed the tour today of the Golan Heights, from the northern section of Nimrod's fortress all the way down to Gamla and several points in between. You know, it's just incredible to see this rich heritage of Jewish life here that dates all the way back to really the book of Genesis, through the first and second temple period, the Talmudic period, of course, and now in the present as we met Major Yaakov Sullivan and all the residents of the Golan Heights. Thank you again to Project Inspire for making this happen, and for all of you for joining me. And if you have any questions pertaining to the tour today or anything about Israel or visiting Israel, please contact me via Facebook. Look me up, like my page. I got great content there as well. David Sussman, Israel Tours. In the meantime, let's enjoy this incredible sunset here over this beautiful reservoir in the Golan Heights.